St. Mark, chapter 6, beginning with verse 14. King Herod Antipas heard of the disciples preaching, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and for this reason those powers are at work in Jesus. Others said, oh no, it is Elijah. And others said, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod Antipas heard it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod himself had sent men to arrest John the Baptist, and they bound him, and they put him in prison on account of Herodias, that is his brother Philip, Herod's wife, because Herod Antipas had married her. For John the Baptist had been telling Herod Antipas, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against John the Baptist and wanted to kill him. But she could not, for Herod Antipas feared John the Baptist, knowing that John was a righteous man and a holy man, and Herod protected John. But when he heard him, Herod was greatly perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to what John the Baptist said. But an opportunity came when Herod Antipas, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers and for his officers and for the leaders of Galilee. And when his daughter Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask of me whatever you wish, and I will give it to you. And he solemnly swore to her, whatever you ask of me, I will give you up to half of my kingdom. Well, she went out, and she said to her mother, what should I ask for? And she replied, the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Immediately, she rushed back to the king and requested it. I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Well, Herod Antipas the king was greatly grieved, yet out of regard for his oath and for his guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately, the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. And he went and he beheaded John in the prison, and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother, and when his disciples heard about it, they came and they took the body of John and they laid it in a tomb. This is the gospel of today. Let us pray.
Thanks be to God.
Lord Jesus, today we thank you for the opportunity to gather at St. Paul's Wurtemberg and to talk about the martyrdom of St. John the Baptist. Lord, help us to read this important gospel text in the Gospel of St. Mark, and help us to look at John in relation to who Jesus is. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
All right, now, back a couple of weeks ago was St. John the Baptist Day. Around June the 26th, we talked about John the Baptist. Today, we have more of the story that comes up in our Revised Common Lectionary Cycle. So today, we're talking in the Gospel of Mark. We're up to chapter 6, verse 14, and we have this story that Mark includes in here. Stop. I want to know about John the Baptist. Okay, where do you look? You read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Josephus. You read the Josephus. Josephus is the Roman historian. He's Jewish/Roman historian. He's not a Christian. He writes about the context of the events that happened during the New Testament period. So starts in maybe 100 BC all the way up to the fall of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, August 10, 70 AD. So if you want background at what it was like in the New Testament days, you read your Flavius Josephus. In the bulletin I put down, read the John Meyer translation, not the William Whiston from 1732. It's unreadable. The John Meyer translation, charts, maps, color pictures, easy to read. Read your John Meyer, read the New Testament. The two books should be on your shelf together. So there's a lot so we have 5 sources for John the Baptist. Today, let's focus on what Mark had to say. Stop. Why is it important to know what the gospel writers have to say about John the Baptist? Because of the John problem. What's the John problem? People knew that John is a great man. He had a huge following. People follow John the Baptist. They had a huge following. He's really popular. So there are still disciples of John the Baptist running around in 50 AD, 60 AD, 95 AD. The time that the New Testament is being written, there are disciples of John the Baptist running around getting converts. So it's almost like you have the Jesus religion and the John the Baptist religion, and they're like next to each other, competing for the same group of converts. So it's a problem. You have to somehow figure out what to do about the problem with John the Baptist. So all four gospel writers make it a point of helping you to understand, get the ducks in a row. First comes John, then comes Jesus. John is less than Jesus, who's the greater one. Over and over again, they say this. So here we have this story today. What are we to make of it? So, well, let's go, right? First of all, the story begins with Herod Antipas. Stop. Who's that? Herod Antipas. If you read the New Testament, there are 3 or 4 characters named Herod. Maybe 5 people named Herod in the New Testament. And they're called Herod. Is that helpful? No, it's not good. Why? Well, it's like saying, and Kennedy said this. What Kennedy? You know, there's a bunch of Kennedys, right? Some would say there's too many Kennedys, right? There are Kennedys all over the place. Or the Bush family, or the Clinton family, right? You're talking about a dynasty of people. So, when you read the New Testament, you have to say to yourself, okay, give me a good reference Bible, let me look it up. When it says King Herod, is that the same Herod that said, slay all the children in Bethlehem 2 years old and younger? No. That's Herod the Great, the father of this guy, who's named Herod Antipas. This guy, Herod Antipas, is called a tetrarch, right? That's a ruler over 4 parts. So when Herod the Great, his old man, died in 4 BC, Philip Herod was given a chunk of territory. Herod Antipas was given a chunk of territory. Herod Antipas' territory is Galilee. And who lives in Galilee? Jesus lives in Galilee and Perea, which is down here a little bit. It's off the map, okay? In modern-day Jordan, okay? So he's given 2 pieces of territory. So when John the Baptist is preaching, where does he preach? The Jordan River is right here. So under Herod's jurisdiction, you have John the Baptist doing his thing, and you have Jesus doing his thing up in Galilee. Herod, it's his job to keep track of things. What do you mean? Herod got his position. Herod the Great, the old man, got his position because the Roman Senate gave this guy the title King of the Jews. Stop. When they crucified Jesus, they put a slogan up in front, right? Right? It says what? INRI, Jesus Nazareth, King of the Jews. And what did the Jewish religious leaders say? Take it down. No, no, no. Instead, he said he was the King of the Jews. And what did Pilate say? I've written what I've written. I don't care what you people think. That's what I'm putting on there. Why is calling yourself the King of the Jews a capital offense in the Roman Empire? You want to know why? Because the Romans are the ones that decide who the king is. The Romans picked Herod the Great back in, 37 BC. They gave him the title. It would be like, here, you're the governor of New York, right? So they gave him the title. So when somebody is running around saying his followers are telling him he's the King of the Jews, guess what? That's a capital offense. That gets the attention of the Herod people, the Herodians. That's like the political party of the Herod dynasty. Okay? So Herod the Great, he is the ruler of this area, and what's his job? To keep law and order and peace and quiet. Who likes law and order? The Romans, right? What do the Romans like? Law and order and peace and quiet. You can believe any stupid thing you want, as long as you pay your taxes and don't cause a revolution, you can do whatever you want. You're free. Just don't whip out a sword and try to say, don't pay your taxes to Rome. That's a capital offense. It's Herod's job to make sure there aren't any problems in this territory. Right? No problems here. What do the Romans want to hear? Happy talk. They want Pilate. He has troops there. Herod says to Pilate, it's all peaceful and quiet now. Taxes are coming in. Everybody's happy. We like that. That's what the Romans like. So it's Herod's job to stay on top of things. And what would happen if the Romans would suddenly disappear? The house of the Herodians would last about 3 minutes. Why is that? They were hated by the Jewish population. They hated them. They hated them. What was the depth of their hatred? Ready? The Herods built 4 forts. Okay, what's the purpose of a fort? To keep the enemy outside. One of them is Masada. You probably have seen this on TV. The Dead Sea is 1,300 feet below sea level. Masada is 1,000 feet above the Dead Sea, right? And it's like a plateau, a butte. It's on top. And I actually took the tram to go up there. They have a thing called the snake path where you can walk up it. It takes like 6 hours to hike up there. I took the tram. I get up there, I walk around top of this plateau, and you look down and you see the Dead Sea, and you look at this sheer drop off 1,000 feet down, and you're like, what kind of a paranoid freak would build a fort like this? And think what would be required in the ancient world. You'd have to carry, they had 7 years worth of food and military equipment up there, and they had cisterns that contained hundreds of thousands of gallons of water, hollowed out from the mountain to collect the rainwater, so they had drinking water and food in case there's a 7-year siege from who? The Jews. They were so paranoid that they had a fortress to protect themselves from their own people. Right? And guess what? That's one fort. They had another fort called the Herodium. It's like an artificial, it looks like a volcano. It's a fake mountain that they built, one load of dirt at a time. And where is it? It's located right outside of Bethlehem. So when Herod the Great said, kill all the children 2 years old, he was probably at the Herodium, which is maybe 5 miles away. Sort of like Burger Hill, right? Yeah, paranoid. Depth of paranoia that you can only imagine, right? And again, how paranoid was Herod the Great? He killed 2 of his own sons because he thought they were plotting against him. I mean, I've been to Thanksgiving dinner. I know about families, right? Would you kill 2 of your own children because you're afraid they're going to get you or something? He's paranoid. He's afraid of his own people. He's afraid of his own shadow. He's afraid of his own family members plotting against him. He had food tasters so they wouldn't be poisoned. He was always worried about being assassinated all the time. That's the depth of paranoia. They had another fortress called Machaerus, and it's on the Jordan side of the Dead Sea. And this is about 1,000 feet above sea level, or above the Dead Sea also. And it's the same thing. It's sheer cliffs all the way around. We think this is where John the Baptist was held prisoner and where he was beheaded, at that fortress. So again, the depth of paranoia, it's mind-numbing, right? So Herod, well, he hears about the disciples. He hears Jesus' name being kicked around. Why? Because it's his job to make sure there aren't any riots or revolutions here. And Galilee is an area where the Romans are particularly squeamish about, because in 4 BC, when Herod the Great died, there was a rebellion among the Jews led by a guy named Judas the Galilean. He tried to kick the Romans out, and the Romans, of course, put it down in a heinous way. They stopped the rebellion. But ever since then, someone from Galilee means, oh, watch out, this is a potential rebel here. Okay? In fact, the legend is that Judas the Galilean started the Zealot movement. But what's that? Kind of like the Al-Qaeda terrorist movement. Okay? He's like the father of that. So Galilee is a very suspicious area. The Jews are the Jews in Galilee are like, they're troublemakers. Gotta watch them, right? So when they start hearing reports that there's a guy named Jesus walking around, and he has big crowds of people following him around, when a Roman hears big crowds of people following someone around, what do they think? It's going to be a revolution. They're going to try to kick us out. Herod, who is a lackey of the Romans, he gets very concerned and very worried. His father died in 4 BC. He rules from 4 BC to 39 AD. And what date do we use for the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus? 33 AD. So is this a date that Bible people made up? Southern Baptist people or something made it up? No, this is in secular extant history. Okay? So we know that Herod the Great was alive, or Herod Antipas was alive during this time. He ruled this time. He's the guy we're talking about here. And so he hears these rumors, and immediately Herod Antipas says, oh no, I'm hearing rumors that this Jesus is going around preaching. Who is it? Well, maybe John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. Got that? Like the Walking Dead. He's walking around with his head, walking around like this, right? So he hears rumors of that. Why? You ever meet anybody who's like really superstitious? Like they don't believe in God, but they're very superstitious. So they read the horoscope and they don't cross the path of a black cat, or they walk under the ladder. They're very superstitious to the point where they're almost paranoid. That's like Herod Antipas. He knows that he killed an innocent man, but the guilt is getting him. You know, remember the Edgar Allan Poe story, The Telltale Heart? Yeah. It's the inner voice. Boom, 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 boom. You hear the heartbeat, you hear the heartbeat. Finally, the guy confesses at the end of the story. That's Herod Antipas. He knows he killed an innocent man, and it's eating him up from the inside. Oh, maybe Jesus is John the Baptist resurrected from the dead. And the powers of John the Baptist have somehow been passed over to Jesus. Where does that weird idea come from? Remember the prophet Elijah? He's taken up into heaven by chariots of fire, and he gives a double portion of his spirit to his successor, Elisha. Maybe this is an Elijah-Elisha kind of a thing. Some people say John the Baptist is Elijah, and he's returning, and Elisha is Jesus. Maybe there's a double portion of his spirit that's been poured out on him. Others say, oh no, he's Elijah. Now again, why is that important? In the book of Malachi, one of the Messianic prophecies is that before the Messiah comes, the prophet Elijah is going to come. So maybe this Jesus is Elijah. They're confused. What's the purpose of the Gospel of Mark? When you read it, you're supposed to answer. The question is, who is Jesus? Mark is giving you the answer, who Jesus is. And is exhausting every lunatic theory, every opinion, every strand is depleted until you get to the end where the centurion says, this is the Son of God. So that's where Mark is going with this. Okay? So others people said, oh, he's a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. So who's Jesus? He's like one of the Old Testament prophets. You know, we haven't had any prophets since Malachi, 400 years of silence. He's one of those. But Herod, when he heard about it, yeah, he says, it's John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. Yeah. So he's maybe it's a reincarnation thing, or maybe he's like superstitious, he's paranoid, it's eating him up. Stop. I have a question, Pastor Mark. Does the Holy Bible teach reincarnation? The answer is no, 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 no. The Holy Bible is one long monotheistic rant, and you are a creature, and it isn't appointed for man once to die, and after comes the resurrection. There is no reincarnation. So some people would point to this and go, see, the Bible teaches reincarnation, that John died, he was beheaded, and now he's reincarnated as Jesus. First of all, John and Jesus met at one time. So reincarnation doesn't work that way. It isn't like you have to be like dead and then you come back, you know, in Hinduism, you come back later as another person. No, the two people living at the same time can't do the reincarnation thing. So anyway, reincarnation is ruled out. There is no reincarnation in the New Testament. No, wrong, wrong, wrong. So Herod he's being eaten alive by the crime that he did. Well, let's get into the details of the crime. I'm interested in watching true crime shows. Well, Herod himself, he's the one that sent men to arrest John. Yeah, so they go down to the Jordan River and they find him in front of a big group of people, and they bind him in chains and they lead him away and they throw him in prison. Now, what's it like being in prison today? Being in prison is a wonderful thing. You get 3 hots and a cot, 3 hot meals and a cot. And you have civil rights, and the ACLU will come in, and you get counseling and therapy, and you can even take college courses if you want. And you have color TV and all kinds of wonderful air conditioning, right? Very humane. In the ancient world, when you go to prison, here's what it is. There's a hole in the ground about 4 stories below where we are now, and it's dark, and they throw you down there, and basically they seal up the entrance. And there's rats down there, and there's sewage down there, and nobody feeds you, and you're either chained to the wall or you can't get out. So basically, being in prison is enough to kill you. Okay? You have to understand this. There's no human rights here. So being thrown in prison is a really bad thing. And typically, the Romans throw people in prison. They leave you there until they decide they're going to kill you. Right? They might let you go, but very unlikely. If you're arrested by the Romans, they're just going to hold you for a while and then kill you. So it's a place you wait before you're killed. So they don't, you're like being on death row. So they throw him in. Well, why did Herod do something like this? First of all, he did it because he could. Okay? Herod Antipas is the king. And what does that mean? That these people that live here, these are called subjects of the king. What does it mean when you're a subject of the king? The king owns you. The king can do whatever the king wants to do. Right? King does whatever he wants. Right? Mel Brooks, History of the World Part 1, what does he say? It's good to be the king. Right? He does whatever he wants. He doesn't like the looks of you, throw you in prison. They do whatever you want. So there's no civil rights here. So he's thrown in prison. Why? Well, because of this. Ready? Because of his wife Herodias. Well, who's she? Again, you have to take out a family tree. Okay? Herod Antipas had a brother named Philip. Philip Herod. Philip Herod was married to Herodias. And what happened? Well, love happened. Yes. And Herod and Herodias decided they want to get married. And guess what? You're not allowed, according to Jewish law, to marry your brother's wife. That's in the Torah. Okay? You're not allowed to do that. Well, that's not true. If your brother is dead, then you're required to marry your brother's wife. It's the way they took care of widows, right? But Philip is still alive. And for what we know, Philip was a pretty good ruler. Everybody speaks well about him. He's a well-organized guy. So, but anyway, his brother, Herod Antipas, stole his wife, right? And John, he was critical of this. He pointed out, excuse me, sir, I'd like to say something. What is that, John? Well, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. You broke the law. You can't do that, okay? Now, what did Herod, did he appreciate the words of the prophet John the Baptist? What's the job of a king? The job of a king in the Old Testament, when the prophet comes around and says, you did something wrong, let me point this out to you. Nathan, the prophet, says to David, you sinned with Bathsheba. Let me point out what you did. David doesn't say, okay, take Nathan out and kill him. Instead, David, a man after God's own heart, a godly ruler, listens to the words of the prophet and amends his behavior. Herod Antipas, not being a godly individual, he's a tyrant. What does he do? Kill the messenger. You ever notice that? It's like people that stand up and say the truth, well, take them out and kill them. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear this stuff. You can't tell me what, you're not the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do. No, John the Baptist is not doing it because he enjoys tormenting people. He's doing it because he's a man of God who's delivering the word of God to somebody that needs to hear the word. Including, who? The king. Why is that? Because kings are people too. We believe in the total depravity of man. That means all human beings have fallen short of the glory of God. Everybody, including the kings, politicians, royal personages, leaders of corporations. Guess what? They're not above the law. The law applies to everyone. We're all equal before God. Someday, we're all going to have to stand before the judgment seat of God, and he's not going to say, excuse me, the important people over here on this side, we'll treat you first. No, everyone is equal before God, including kings and rulers. You got that? So Herod, instead of saying, I'm going to heed the words of John the Baptist, no, throw him in prison, right? Well, guess what? Herod is weird. He's got this love-hate thing going with John. Like, he likes to hear what he likes his preaching style. He likes to hear what he says. He's intrigued, like a moth being drawn to a fire, an open flame. He's intrigued. He wants it. But guess what? His wife Herodias, she holds a grudge. What's holding a grudge mean? Well, Linda, you're from New Jersey.
You come from Jersey. I knew that was going to...
It's like,
I knew.
It's like someone did you wrong in junior high. 47 years later, you've been waiting, and you get him back at the Paramus Mall. Yeah, you never forget. These people from New Jersey, they never forget. Vindication. Yeah, that's what they do. They'll never forget. So that's Herodias. She's holding a grudge against, what do you mean? You were down talking to that guy again, John the Baptist? Don't you love me? I'm Herodias. No, don't you love... If you love me, you wouldn't be talking to that guy. He puts bad ideas in your mind, doesn't he? Herod Antipas, right? So she holds a grudge. And what does she do? She's mumbling and murmuring and plotting. But yet, Herod Antipas is like attracted. He's like attracted to John, and he's like repelled from John at the same time. He knows what John says is the truth and it comes from God. And he knows he should listen to it, but he decides, I'm not going to listen to what God says, but at the same time, I'm kind of interested in what God has to say. Isn't that weird? It's fascinating. Fascinating. So what happens then? It's a birthday party. Yay! We love birthdays, right? Happy birthday to Herod. Happy birthday. There's a big banquet. And who's there? Everybody that's important is there. His courtiers, his officers, all the leaders in Galilee. All the important people are at Herod's birthday, right? And what did they do? They gave him gift certificates to Walmart. No, I'm sure he got all kinds of fabulous gifts because he's a very important person. Well, guess what happens? There's a dance. And the tradition is her name is Salome. She's the daughter of Herodias. So it would be like the half-daughter, of Herod Antipas. She does a dance, okay? Now, first of all, what's this all about? This is considered lewd pagan behavior. Jewish girls don't do this, okay? So, in other words, here, get your daughter out there to act like a pagan. So, scantily clad, dancing around a bunch of drunken old men, right? And of course, Herod Antipas is greatly impressed with her technique. Great dancer, right? Want to show a couple moves here, right? So she's dancing up, and he's great. So he says to her, after the dance is all over, he says, first of all, if he was a good stepfather, he wouldn't have his daughter dancing in front of a bunch of his drunken idiot friends, right? So there's a problem here. Should raise a red flag. So he says to her, ask me whatever you wish, and I'll give it to you. Now, when he said this, where did he say this?
At the party.
In front of his entire group of cronies. The crones, right? What's honor, shame, society mean?
Saving face.
If you do it in public, then if he was to say, I changed my mind, well, then he would lose face in front of all of his bros here. You see how this works? I'll give you whatever you want. So, what does she do? She says, I'll be right back. She goes out and confers with Herodias, her mom. I have 3 daughters. Let me give you a hint here. You don't want to be in a position like this where the women are conspiring against you. You're dead. Finished. The guy's dead meat. The story ends right here. The women are conspiring. Okay? So she comes back with this. What do you want? I want the head of John the Baptist.
Evil.
Now, Herod would probably have been happy to give her a bunch of money, diamonds, a gift card to QVC, something like that. That's what he was thinking, right? But no. Instead, she wants the one thing. And remember, he kind of likes this guy, but he's repelled at the same time. Love-hate thing going on. He was probably keeping him alive. He could have starved him or something. He's keeping him alive. And she says, I want you to give me the head of John the Baptist on a platter. What do you serve on a platter at a formal banquet?
The meal.
Deli meat. Fancy meat. Antipasta. You bring it on out. Oh, beautiful. So the head of John the Baptist is the fancy meat that's served at the banquet. That's how sick these people are. These are degenerates. Okay? And the king was deeply grieved. Right? And yet, out of regard to his oath and his guests, he did not want to refuse her. In other words, what's this? Love God and love your neighbor. Okay? What comes first? All right? Here's the problem. He doesn't care what God says. He cares what the neighbors think. How many times have you heard this? Oh, I'm just doing what my friends want me to do. Oh, everyone is doing it. It's okay. Well, no. You're supposed to be a Christian. You do what God tells you to do, and then if there's anything left over, then you ask your friends what you should do. Right? And if your friends tell you to do something that's in contradiction to what God wants you to do, guess what? God wins. This guy, he doesn't care about God. He cares about what the cronies have to say. What do you think, boys? Oh, I can't let them down. They're expecting a good show here. The head of John the Baptist on a platter. You can't beat that. What a great show. So guess what? He knows he's doing the wrong thing. He's murdering an innocent man of God. And so he orders it. He sends his soldiers the guard down, and they brought back the head of John the Baptist. And they brought it on a platter and gave it to the girl. And the girl did what? Gave it to her mother, Herodias. And what did she think? Problem solved. I killed the messenger. I won't have to listen to him anymore. Isn't that interesting? What is it about the sin? Well, when you try to cover up the sin, the cover-up is worse than the sin itself. So this is like a downward spiral, right? You should have listened to John to begin with. And now you end up murdering John, right? And not only that, it's a public thing. It isn't like he slipped on a bar of soap and hit his head and died in prison. No. Instead, it's a public event where they kill him in front of all the leading people of Galilee and all the important, religious leaders and chieftains. Everybody at the party knows about what this guy did. He's a tyrant. He's a demon. He's one who says, I don't care what God says. And when the disciples heard about it, this story is so profound and captivating. When the disciples of John heard about it, what did they do? They came and they took the body of John and they laid it in a tomb. Stop. You know what that is? That's like take a knife and stick it in your heart and twist it around a couple of times. What happened to Jesus? He's crucified. They left him on the cross. And were his disciples standing around to give him a decent burial? No, what did they do? They all ran away. They all ran away. And who was left? Only the women were left. Only the women were left behind. They all ran away. So it's the opposite of what happened to John. John's disciples loved their master, and they gave him a decent burial, and they did the manly thing. They went and got the body of John, which is a dangerous thing, because they could have been executed too, and they gave him a decent burial. Whereas Jesus' own disciples all ran away. This is a foreshadow of things to come. That's why Mark put this in here. Mark doesn't tell us a whole lot about John, because it's a book about Jesus. It's not a book about John. So this story is in here because John is the predecessor to Jesus of Nazareth. So you're supposed to go, wow, look what they did to John the Baptist. A righteous dude who never did anything wrong except preached God's word, and they killed him in a heinous way, and his disciples gave him a decent burial. What? It's a foreshadow of what's going to happen to Jesus in Mark chapter 15 and 16. So that's where we're going with this. So this is an opportunity to think about John. John the Baptist. Realize he's the first martyr. We have John the Baptist. The second martyr in the New Testament is Saint Stephen, who's stoned to death, deacon and martyr. And the third martyr is James, the brother of John. James and John, sons of Zebedee. He's killed by the sword around 42 AD. So in the Gospels, we have three crowned martyrs. John the Baptist, Saint Stephen, and Saint James. He's the first one of many. So today, it's good to think about the Gospel of Mark. It's good to think about John the Baptist. Amen.